Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Thank you for joining us for Newsmakers. I'm Casey Counts. June 7th, New Mexico had its primary election. It was the first time voters could temporarily register with a party to be able to participate. It's referred to as a semi-open primary, and that's where we'll begin today with our guest, Doña Ana County Clerk, Dr. Amanda Lopez Askin, joining us from Albuquerque via Zoom. Thank you so much for taking some time to be with us today.
Happy to be here as always, Casey. Thank you for having me.
First, I'd like to start by asking what you can tell us about voters' use of the opportunity to vote in the primary if they were not previously registered with a major party.
Sure. What I can tell you is that Doña Ana County had the third highest utilization of the same-day voter registration connected to participating in the election. That means that we had well over 500 people decide to take advantage of same-day voter registration, with the bulk of them being those who wanted to participate, were not with a major party, and the three parties being Democrat, Republican, or Libertarian. They had not chosen that previously, so they were able to choose one of those on election day or even previously during early voting, and they were able to vote in the primary. They were able to participate, which historically they never would have been able to do. So we definitely consider it a success for Doña Ana County and the state of New Mexico.
Now, for some time, there have been calls for New Mexico to become an open primary state to allow everyone, regardless of party affiliation, to participate in the primary. What are the advantages to remaining a closed primary state?
Well, I think, sometimes people do what they've always done because they've always done it that way. And that's kind of sometimes seems to be what filters to the top when we start talking about why. And really, a lot of it has to do with I refer to it as picking a lane. And I talk about picking a lane specifically when I talk to election officials when I'm doing training before, they run our elections. And so what I said to them is, people have picked a lane, right? And that would be one of the three major parties. And they believe within those parties that if you want to participate in a primary, the purpose of it is a nomination process. And if you are part of this party, then you can be part of the nomination process. And primaries are very connected to the upcoming, election in the fall, whether it be a midterm or, the general. It's very connected to that. So if you're participating in the primary and you're nominating someone, that means you are part of a major party. And the parties often believe that this is something that should continue to historically happen. The argument against that, right, is that I know even as long as I've been clerk, and I'll be appointed in 2018, I was elected in 2020. And so it'll be 4 years this coming September that I've been the clerk. And what I've seen is a rise in registrations for DTS. We call them DTS in New Mexico instead of independents, but those who decline to state, they're not interested in claiming a major party. And with the increase of DTS, the belief is that those individuals, and many of them are young people who are not choosing, are disenfranchised in participating in elections when they are publicly funded. And so as a taxpayer, there's very much this righteous indignation that they should have the ability to participate regardless of whether if they have picked a major party, because moving into the general, then they're going to have an option then on that end. So I can definitely see the arguments for both. I am really pleased that the semi-open primary this year was successful, and I know a lot of our poll officials were really actually happy, because can you imagine the amount of probably frustrations they have dealt with people who want to want to vote, and they have to tell them historically, that they have not been able to, or you had to pick a party and it's too late now. So that was good news, I think, for Doña Ana County in New Mexico.
What insight can you offer in terms of the likelihood that New Mexico will someday become an open primary state?
Well, I think probably as much as the average clerk, right? Like I have that insight. I do actively work on legislation with many of our legislators and many of the clerks across the state. I'm on a specific committee that addresses legislation. And of course, it would have to be legislatively done. In 2020, during the pandemic, we had a very specific legislator decide he was going to leave, not run. And that was his amendment on the floor. He wanted to amend the election code to include the semi-open primary. And it almost seemed as if it was a, not a gift, but maybe a swan song, a good, kind of a nice goodbye to him to give him that option, and it passed. So those were kind of special circumstances. I'm not sure if that would fly moving forward. It's very possible, especially with the success that we have seen and voters being happy. And for me, the increase in DTS, again, independent minded voters who, just don't want to pick a party, but they want to participate. And the thing that for me, I think, as clerk is the more participation, the more engagement, the more inviting we are, the more we invite people to the table of democracy, so to speak, the better we all are, because people are participating.
If I understood you correctly, because of the semi-open primary, about 500 more people ultimately participated in the primary. In a news release, your office said about 15,400 people, or just over 16% of registered voters, cast ballots, and that's down from 26,000 voters in 2020. You've cited the swell of excitement that comes with a national election. When the presidency is on the line, more people turn out. What should be happening to drive greater turnout in future elections that are of more local interest other than what you've already suggested?
Well, I think a lot of the discussions nationally, they do trickle down locally. We can think of some of the issues connected to the school boards that they're, having on a national stage, whether that's people for or against the discussion of critical race theory. I can think of even elections, right, being on the ballot in some ways, because we do have those officials who are running and they do not believe that elections were fair and free, right? So those are the things that might drive voters. I do know locally a lot of the things that I've heard in discussions is some of the potential decisions by the Supreme Court, right? That's been alluded to. We don't know what's going to happen. That's something that may drive voters, may drive women specifically. Ultimately, I think it's all the things, right? It's all the things that will drive voters. And we do what we can to promote. We have our social media. We do as much media as we can. We will talk to community groups. Unfortunately, New Mexico does not have a fund specifically for voter education. And so that would be great in the future if we were able to somehow do that, is to offer nonpartisan, information that people are able to access to increase participation as well. And of course, we always are looking at young people. We always are looking at young people because, you and I vote. And I always say that a lot of the narratives connected to election fraud that are blatantly wrong have affected especially younger people and those who may not historically participate, because maybe they were on the fence about participating, they wanted to participate, and then they start hearing these things that my vote doesn't count, and they get discouraged and they don't show up. And that is of grave concern to me. And I know many of the clerks across the state, and probably some of the average people who believe in elections for sure, and know that is not true. So, what drives voters? Everything. Some things on the national stage, sometimes things locally, right? There have been hot topics or hot button issues locally, and it can really drive voters as well as candidates that people really like or sometimes really don't like. Sometimes you're not necessarily voting for someone, you're voting against someone. That happens all the time. So I am always open to ideas about what we can do to increase turnout, what we can do to connect with more people, especially those who've not historically participated, because, again, underscoring this idea that we're all better for increased participation.
Secretary of State Maggie Toulouse-Oliver recently launched a new section on the website, so perfect timing to move into this topic. Yeah. It's called Rumor versus Reality, Fact-Checking Misinformation about New Mexico's Voting and Elections. Can you touch on some of the salient points addressed by this effort? And do you expect that they'll reach people who are suspicious of our elections?
This is the day after the certification of the election in Doña Ana County at the county level. And this is also, during the week of the certification that's happening across the state for all of the other counties. So this is an interesting week to be asking me that question. I think kudos to our Secretary of State and her team for offering that. Our Secretary of State has functioned in a way that has been accessible and transparent and getting in front of issues and things that have happened. And she was able to do that as the Bernalillo County Clerk as well. We know that the reason that she put that site up, the rumor versus reality, is because clerks across the state are asked those questions every day, and sometimes in not appropriate ways, not in appropriate venues, and also there have been individuals who I know it doesn't matter what I say. It was a bad joke, but I said, somebody could be with me 24 hours a day before, during, and after an election and follow everything I did. And they would still at the other end not believe some of the things that I'm saying, even if they were with me and bear witness to it all. So I hope that, again, we talk about that gray area. People really want to know. They want to know how it works. They want to know the process, whether that's the air gapping that we have and our machines not being connected to the internet, how we secure the vote, the privacy of the ballot, all of those things that we get asked about every single day. And I'm hoping it reaches those folks who really want to have faith in our elections and want to participate, or have a discussion with a neighbor who's citing things that just aren't true. Those are all the people we want to reach. I would love it if we could reach those people who have dug in and decided that it is what it is and they believe what they believe, and it doesn't matter what information, what proof we give. Because ultimately, I think enough is enough. We are tired across the state as clerks, and I'll just speak for myself and allow any of the other clerks to speak up if they choose to, but we are community members. We are embedded in our communities. We ran for office because we believed in what we do. And the idea that, as somebody who's local, born and raised in Doña Ana County, is participated in a big way, I think, in my community since I've been able to, the idea that I would co-sign or support any kind of nefarious activity because I have a political perspective is damaging. It's damaging, it's wrong, and it really needs to stop.
You recently invited the public to offer comment before the primary results were certified by the county. What were some of the concerns that you heard? What are people worried about?
Well, some of the concerns that I've received specifically that yesterday during our county commission meeting, I had a woman approach me after meeting, very nice woman, said, I had these two concerns. I had this experience on election day. And so we talked through it. And at the end of it, I said to her, it would be great? It would be so great if you actually worked as an election official, if you signed up and you trained with us and you were able to be responsible with other groups of people at one of our sites to see all the checks and balances we have in place, to see how we secure your vote, to see how finite and detail oriented we are. And I think that would restore a lot of the faith you have. So I invited her to, again, get onto our website, dacelections.com. There's a section specifically for those who are interested in becoming an election official, and go from there. That's one of the things we always offer. But again, circling back, it's those folks that are concerned about participation and the lack of faith in elections. A couple of weeks ago, there was an individual who, in a public comment portion of our county commission meeting, it said that he had been, canvassing neighborhoods prior to the election for a specific candidate or party. I'm not quite sure, but that he had come up with a lot of distrust of elections. And one of the things that I said in response to that is, well, when you denigrate elections, when you talk about election officials as if we are criminals sometimes, and the message is continual and unrelenting, that is going to affect voter faith. It just is. So I know I've kind of decided, I know other clerks have decided that we're going to be a little more in front of it and take more advantage of the opportunities like this, or even during county commission meetings, public input portion, because historically I have not necessarily responded because I thought, well, I don't want to create another headline. I don't want to have this fight in public where they say this and I say that. But it's not necessarily been as helpful as I would want it to be to just step back and let the lies disappear. And so what I've started to do and what I'm determined to do is rebut those lies with fact and move forward, every time.
How do you compare the number of people who you encounter that are distrustful today versus before 2020?
Well, my experience as clerk has been it's been a windy road. If you recall, in 2018, I was appointed. A few days after I was appointed, we had the 2018 election, which was very high profile. A candidate claimed victory. It turned out they did not win. And we had a delay of counting of the ballots. So that was my first election. And we made national news, which not necessarily something I want to do again. And so there was that. Then we had our elections during the pandemic, which were my, other two elections. I also had ranked choice voting within that, the first time we had. So I've had a windy road to get to this. And so to say yesterday was a great day because we had kind of the average election. I think that would probably be pretty accurate. I continue to hope and I continue to hopefully offer information that is helpful and that voters understand that it's clear and concise, and I think we'll continue to do that.
Now let's move over to Otero County. Commissioners did not certify their results. There were 3 races that were on election night, too close to call. The next action by the commission was to ask for a hand recount, remove state-mandated drop boxes, and even discontinue use of the Dominion voting machines in the future. The Secretary of State's office has sued. What do you expect to come of that action, and what is your level of concern that this type of sentiment could take root in Doña Ana County?
Well, just to circle back, I think it's really important to note that I am very fortunate to have a county commission that has been 100% supportive of me. And my understanding, based on a variety of information, is that the plan for those folks who are supporting the idea that something is amiss, the big lie, et cetera, is to do exactly what is happening, to go to county commissions that they believe might be more sympathetic to them, and that would be more Republican led commissions, and appeal to them, then have public comment. And they have recruited folks from the community to offer that public comment who agree with them, and then start to put that pressure on them during those meetings, right? So they initially, the New Mexico Audit Force and other entities have tried to present the, I call it a fraud audit, quite frankly, because it is not an audit. It is a report that's full of many, it's wrong. And so they attempted to present that to my commission, and they were told no. They're welcome to do public comment, as is any individual, but they're not going to present something that is incorrect and not factual to our commission as fact. So when they were initially told no, I believe that was a sign that it was not going to go well in Doña Ana County for them, and they moved on to other counties. And I am very grateful for that. And I will tell you this, Robin Holmes is the county clerk in Otero County. She is a Republican and she is a friend of mine, and you will never get a better clerk than Robin Holmes. You'll never get somebody who's more dedicated to election than Robin and her team. And the fact that she has had to deal with this when all she has done is run clean, fair, accurate elections is an outrage. And I'm very upset on her behalf. I've spoken with her. She is taking it in stride. But I also know that the stress that those kind of things brings is very overwhelming. So I feel comfortable in my commission. I feel comfortable in Doña Ana County, but they came for us first, right? And so they've moved on. Now they're coming for other folks, and they're succeeding in the short term. What I know to be true is election code is election code. And so you cannot certify, but then it shall be certified. And it shall be certified likely maybe at district court, but the county commission is one of the routes that we use to move forward election certification to head to the Secretary of State's office. And that will happen because by law it needs to happen. And, I believe that it was an overreach on their part. And it was unfortunate because it's made headlines and caused more chaos.
We also had the opportunity recently to speak with Holmes, and I know she's been with Otero County for 30 years. and is really hoping for a resolution that will help people have faith in their elections moving forward. And, it's no secret that since 2020 especially, election workers have been the targets of harassment and in some cases very violent threats. During the January legislative session, Maggie Toulouse-Oliver testified about her experiences and advocated for legislation to further protect folks like yourself. Give us your thoughts on what happened in the session and what pieces of legislation you think are necessary to protect our election workers.
Thank you for that question, Casey. I think it's really important to underscore that at the end of the day, we're all humans that head home to a family and want to be okay. And you're referring to Senate Bill 144, and I actually testified on that as well, along with our Secretary of State. She had extreme issues connected to her safety. We were talking being on a website targeted nationally, along with other Secretaries of State, having to move out of her home. It was just incredibly distressing. And as a colleague and friend, I was very sympathetic towards her. I have also had to report death threats to the FBI and have them investigated. And so I know what that is like. I have a 6-year-old. I shop at the grocery store and have been approached by individuals connected to my job. Have they been threatening? No, absolutely not, thankfully. But I've also walked out of a restaurant and had somebody see me and scream at me, "Democrats lie, Democrats lie," when I was with my daughter. So there's certain levels. If that is the extent of it, I can probably get through it, but I'm all for any kind of legislation that supports the safety of individuals running elections so we're able to do our job in the way that we should be able to without any duress or threat.
Let's expand to the greater content of the New Mexico Voting Rights Act. And we've seen the 2020 election claims made by the former president result in new voting laws across the country that restrict access to the polls, the justification being election integrity. Do you think the bill was appropriate, and do you think it will be reconsidered in a future session, given the big question marks that, of course, only the general election in November will decide?
Yes, I think it will be reconsidered, and yes, I do believe it will pass. Now, is it in its entirety? I do not know. There were some things that were hot button items for folks that they just didn't like. Specifically, I heard about the 16-year-olds they were not happy about. Some did not like the idea of a state holiday being election day. Those are the things that tended to get the most reaction that was negative, and then the rest was discussed, and it was kind of along the spectrum. So I would say I do expect it to pass. And also, this is a reminder to New Mexicans, we are so lucky. We are so fortunate to live in a state that is voter-centric, voter-friendly, is doing everything we can do to make sure that New Mexicans have safe access, secure access to the ballot box. I look at my neighbors in Arizona, in Texas, across the country. I look at my colleagues there and have emailed them when I've seen a particular story that bothered me or some election-specific news that I've subscribed to where they're battling this. And we're not talking party affiliation. That's out the door at this point. We're talking doing a good job for our community, which they are doing, and then what they're having to implement connected to the administration of the election is they know is not good for voters, not good for turnout, not good for democracy. But as clerks and those who are running elections, we are also sworn in to follow the laws and the Constitution of our respective states and the United States. And therefore, if it's law, then we must follow through with it. And that has to be really, really tough.
Many voters go to the polls without a lot of information about all the candidates on the ballot. What sources do you recommend for voters ahead of Election Day or early voting that can help them make the most informed decisions possible when they vote?
Sure. So I think there are some good options. I think if you're connected to a major party, and even if you are not, connecting with the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the Libertarian Party, and the specific information or trainings that they have is always a good idea. We have unprecedented access to information. Casey, I'm not going to age either you or me, but 25 years ago, we could not sit there and Google candidates, Google their websites, go to their YouTube page, find their videos, see what they're about. Maybe we can find candidates of them. We couldn't do that. We had to rely on print media often, or ads on television, which we know how those can be a little frustrating as well. So we have unprecedented access access to information. And I think we should use all the tools we can, as well as connecting directly with candidates. I know that we have a great opportunity in New Mexico to actually speak with candidates. You can literally call one of your senators and say, this is what I'm concerned about, or what do you think about this? And they will answer. So I think all of the ways, including getting basic voting information, not candidate specific, on websites and tools and resources that I know have provided, that other clerks across the state have provided, as well as the Secretary of State's office has provided.
There have been some issues in the past with poll watchers. How does your office accommodate them, and what are the expectations on both sides?
Sure, and I think you're probably referring more to poll challengers, election challengers, right? So there's challengers, there's watchers, and there are observers. Observers tend to be more the academics and that are watching behavior, et cetera. But the challengers are specific in the terms that they can challenge voters, eligibility, or they can challenge whether the law is being followed on site. And I always say this, and I firmly believe that the more eyes on an election and a polling site, the better. It can only benefit transparency. It can only benefit democracy. It can only benefit our community if we have all eyes on deck, and that includes challengers and watchers, and we always welcome them. The expectation is they not in any way get in the way of a voter trying to vote. They not intimidate, and they're appropriately behaved, connected to the election officials that are running the election at each site. And those are the expectations, and if they're not adhered to, then it needs to be addressed. Now, initially it would be addressed by the supervisor on site, which is the presiding judge, which is an election official. And then if it's not appropriate, if an individual for whatever reason chooses not to comply, then it would be escalated to me, and then I would probably confer with the presiding judge. So we welcome them. They can only benefit us, and they are from a variety of parties. I will tell you, Doña Ana County had almost 300 watchers, challengers, observers in 2020. And I would say that is more than all of the other counties combined. So we know how to deal with and welcome challengers, watchers, and observers. We also know that we have set some standards specifically connected to their behavior, and always welcome those that are willing to adhere to that.
That was a surprising number, and thank you for that clarification initially. And thank you so much, Dr. Amanda Lopez Askin, Doña Ana County Clerk, for taking this time to talk to us today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Casey.
And that's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's Morning Edition from 5 to 9. Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now from noon to 2. And All Things Considered 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org. And we'd like to hear from you. Email us with story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm Casey Counts. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.